is there a special question out of all of this?
So, Christina, do you want to say your question again now?
No, I just wanted to say that we talked about suffering, conditions, causes, remembering what you explained last time. I don't know if anybody has a question regarding this. I don't have.
There are so many questions. We tried to find the talking about origins. What's the origin of suffering? Okay, we got to the fact that the mind is at the origin of suffering. Okay, what is the origin of mind? We got to the answer that birth is the origin of mind. You know, but these are only speculations from our part. We don't know what's the truth, and we are just blindly walking through this concept.
Right. So let's take it from there. I mean, I wanted to ask something else. Are you doing the motivation when you have the discussion group? You first started with the motivation? Okay, just wanted to check that we have something there. Good. Right. So what we were doing in the last sessions is we were going over these four noble truths. And why am I doing this? Because we wanted to talk about wisdom. And so I wanted to point out what's the point of wisdom in Buddhism. You know, what is it good for? Why? What's the central point of wisdom? How does it come in? And so for this, I wanted to go through the first two truths. Yeah, so to see the true suffering, and then out of understanding the true suffering that we are experiencing, which is something that we have now talked a little bit about. Nobody should expect that. Therefore, we have understood what the true sufferings are. This is really something you would do a retreat on. You would meditate on. This kind of truth is something that is going to keep you busy for the rest of your life. One of the major topics. This goes so far that sometimes other religions would call Buddhism as being very negative, because it's constantly talking about suffering. It says everything is suffering and so forth. Yeah. So I wanted to point out that on the one hand, the very first thing that Buddha ever taught was suffering, and the true sufferings were the very first thing that he ever talked about. But I also wanted to put it into context. Why is he talking about this? He talks about this because he is addressing us out of his love and compassion. And he sees how we all want to be happy. And so if we are happy, but our actual experiences are suffering or are in the nature of suffering, then something needs to be thought about. Something needs to be analyzed here. And in the end, of course, the Buddha is offering a completely different way of existence, or a different way of living your life, and a different form of joy and happiness than what we are experiencing. So therefore, there's a solution. So in the end, Buddhism comes from the happiness that we are looking for, and the Buddha is teaching out of love for us, because he wants us to experience this happiness. Love is the wish for the other person to be happy. And he also sees that we don't want suffering, only happiness. And he sees that we are suffering instead. And so this is the compassion of the Buddha, is to wish that the other person wouldn't suffer. So it's all about this happiness and the absence of suffering, and just diagnosing that right now we're not getting what we're looking for. But the Buddha has an answer to that. Yeah? So he has something else to offer. He has something else to offer that he himself went for, and that he's experiencing. So out of his experience, he says there is a completely different way of feeling joy, a way of being happy and peaceful, that actually deserves the name of joy. Yeah, something like when the Buddha says everything is suffering, he's actually saying everything is in the nature of suffering. It's not that everything is suffering. Suffering is an unpleasant feeling. It is not that all our experiences are unpleasant. We have pleasant feelings. But these feelings are not, these pleasant feelings are not the actual answer to our deepest longing. So therefore, because they cannot satisfy us and they cannot last, and they will necessarily diminish, and we will get bored with whatever. It's a completely normal aspect of samsara, that things wear off, that we get bored with things. It's the most wonderful thing. We get bored after some time. It is in the nature of our joy that it will not last. It cannot last. Not with that mindset, not with that karma, not with those afflictions behind it. not with this perception of ourselves. Our happiness is doomed, is from the beginning, has the headline, will be over. It is not something that can fulfill us for a long term, and is therefore not in the nature of happiness. And the Buddha says something is in the nature of happiness if it is something that you would like to do again and again and again. It will never wear off, and it's something that even gets more by experiencing it more. We have none such experience. All our happy experiences are diminishing after some time, they wear off, and we have to look for something else, because our method did not give rise to anything else than that kind of happiness out of a relation, out of an object, out of an opinion about ourselves, out of a situation, and so forth. So the Buddha is calling this kind of happy feelings or pleasant feelings that they are in the nature of suffering. They are not suffering. Suffering is an unpleasant feeling. But our pleasant feelings are not unpleasant feelings. Obviously, they are pleasant feelings. So they're actually happiness. But this happiness is in the nature of suffering. So that's the first truth. The true sufferings are actually saying that everything that we experience is in the nature of suffering. So normally this is saying like the Buddha is saying everything is suffering or everything is the nature of suffering. But in the end, this is referring to our experiences. Of course, the Buddha state itself is not in the nature of suffering. Nirvana is not in the nature of suffering. Yeah. So there is a state of peace. There is a state of bliss, a state of lasting fulfillment. So that is not in the nature of suffering. So anyway, the Buddha is describing all our unsatisfactory experiences. And if he would just leave it there, one Geshe once said, if the Buddha would only have taught the first of the Four Noble Truths without teaching the other three, he would be the cruelest being in the universe. Because we put in so much effort every day to cover up how we are only having unsatisfactory experiences. We're constantly telling each other how wonderful this is. And isn't that really nice now? Look what we got now. It's so good, you know. We constantly talk about it. We kind of try to reassure each other that it's really, really good. So the Buddha is taking this away. He's saying, no, it's not like that. It's actually not that good. It's fading as we're speaking. And you have this experience of being very joyful about this, because before that, you have experienced a lot of negative things. Yeah, so there's, for example, we have, for example, the following. Yeah, this is very interesting. If you go for a walk or a hike, and you, let's say, walk for an hour or for 1.5 hours, and you're getting really, really tired, and your whole body is getting stiff and is hurting and so forth, and then you come to a bench and you sit down on this bench, you're experiencing almost bliss from now finally being able to sit down. Yeah. This has as its condition that you had pain before. Just sitting on a bench is half as blissful as one would imagine. It's just blissful because you were in so much pain from having been walking for 1.5 hours. Yeah. So means if you have been, let's say you get up in your room and you go out on the street and you go to the park and this takes you 5 minutes and you sit down on a bench, it's definitely not as blissful as when you have been walking for 1.5 hours and you're completely in pain, and now you can sit down and the strain on your body is relieved. So there is certain kind of experiences that we have that actually have as their condition, as the immediately previous moments, necessary moments, that we undergo. We went through some stress, or we went through some pain or something else. So that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for getting some happiness from relief, getting some happiness because the pain subsides. Because if that's the kind of happiness that we're experiencing, then we have to have the pain before. And many people would say that. Yeah? They would say like, oh, you know, I like pain because you cannot have happiness without pain. So there's some pain, that's okay, and then there's happiness, and then there's pain, and there's happiness, and so forth. So the Buddha is saying there is happiness without pain. And happiness that is coming from pain is in the nature of suffering for that very reason. And also, if you experience a happiness because the pain has subsided, then this is definitely set up for after 10, 15 minutes, the situation has changed and you don't any longer think it's so blissful to sit down. Actually, this takes only some few minutes. After some few minutes, the pain that you had before from walking so much is no longer your problem, sitting there is no longer giving you the same relief that you had before. It's just gone, and instead you start to move on your bench, the bench that you were so happy to finally sit down on, and to kind of just fall on this bench in order to no longer have to stand or to walk and so on. And then you're sitting there, and then this happy experience is getting very normal, maybe boring. And at one point, your body says, you know, I've been sitting on my backside for a long time now. Now I need to move a little bit. I have to sit differently. So this very blissful experience of sitting down is changing naturally. It's for everybody like this. It's nothing special in this situation. Everybody has this all the time. It's changing into pain, into discomfort. Yeah, the happiness of relief is coming only because you had strong discomfort before that has built up to a very strong stressful discomfort. Then you sit down and you're so relieved. And then you sit there, and after 5, 10, 15 minutes, you need to move because this position is just so wrong. It's just causing you pain. So this is a happiness that is coming from pain and changes into pain. And that's a happy experience. So this is called the suffering of change. Yeah. And so you hear different explanations for why it is called suffering of change. Some people say the suffering of change is a happiness that comes from changing out of a strong suffering into this moment of release, of relief. Other people say it is a suffering of change because that happiness is from the first moment diminishing and changing towards pain, to the suffering of suffering. But other people just say like the suffering of change is actually not a suffering. It is a happy feeling. It is that joy that we have. The joy that we are experiencing normally in samsara is subsumed by the Buddha under the headline or in the group that is called the suffering of change. We have the suffering of suffering, which is the pain that we all know. If somebody kind of puts his hand into a boiling water, you will experience pain. That's the suffering of suffering. Then over if somebody has a strong headache, or if somebody feels lonely, or somebody feels rejected, or something like that. So all of that experiences are the suffering of suffering. Then you have this positive ones where a certain kind of stress is relieved, or a certain kind of exhaustion is met with sitting down or relaxing or something like this. So that from the first moment is changing, is diminishing from the very first moment onwards. It has as cause that you had pain before. So that kind of stuff, this kind of happy experience is also in the nature of suffering, and is called the suffering of change. And then the Buddha is talking about a third suffering, which is the suffering, all-pervasive compounded suffering. And this is talking about that if you have taken birth, and you have such a mind as we have, and you have karma working in your daily life, and certain kind of habits and patterns working, and all the afflictions going on in your mind, and you have this kind of body as we have, this kind of body that needs to be fed and needs to be washed, and it's naturally sweating and it's naturally stinking and stuff like this. So this kind of body, then you will at one point either have the suffering of suffering or the suffering of change. So that in itself is a neutral state, but it is a state which is kind of waiting for the next situation to generate a suffering of suffering or a suffering of change. So that's samsara in itself. Yeah, to simply be in samsara is a suffering, dissatisfying situation. It is always a setup for actually getting pain, or a happy experience that don't last but changes into pain. And so the example or the analogy that is used is that somebody has a big wound somewhere on the arm, let's say. And so somebody else comes along and rubs some salt into this open wound. And it is paining like burning or something like that. So that would be the suffering of suffering. And then you have somebody else, and he comes along and he puts some cream and something that kind of numbs maybe the wound, kind of take care of the wound, and the wound might be infected, so the wound is kind of hot or something. So he puts something cooling on it, yeah. So there's a relief. That would be the suffering of change, our happy experience. It's just an analogy for that. And then there might be a moment where neither does somebody apply a cooling cream or something, nor somebody puts a salt, rubs salt into this wound. We simply have a wound. That's the third type of suffering, the all-pervasive compounded suffering. This is samsara in itself. At any moment, something can fall on this wound. Somebody might come along, touch the wound, might put salt into the wound or whatever, any moment, because we have a wound. And somebody might come along, maybe not so often, but somebody might come along and do something good to this wound. But if we don't heal this wound, we will always have this wound. Yeah. So this is the action point. So how our Geshe is often talking about this is that normally, like we all like to, many people like to meditate on compassion. But the question is, what kind of understanding of compassion do they have? So normally people think about compassion when they think about that somebody has broken his arm, or somebody is distressed, or somebody is lonely, and you want to help with that. And Geshe says, he says, this is a suffering that everybody knows. Even the animals understand this kind of suffering. Yeah, even the animals, and there is indeed a lot of stories about animals helping other animals that are in distress or in danger and stuff like this, or helping human beings that are in danger and so forth. So everybody understands this kind of compassion. You don't have to study Buddhism for that. You don't have to do great meditation retreats in order to generate this kind of compassion. It is to some extent already there, even with animals. Yeah. So if you would see somebody who has a big wound on the arm, and then you would see somebody else coming along and rubbing some salt in, you would feel that almost physically. Yeah, you would have compassion with that, or you would upset at that. So it's already there. The second one, to have compassion because the other person is suffering from the suffering of change. Now we're getting into the realm of spirituality. To really have compassion for another person because all the happiness that this person is experiencing is very short-lived, is in the nature of suffering, is coming about because there was a suffering of suffering before, and it will change into a suffering of suffering later on. You have to have a compassion for the worldly experience of happiness. That's very difficult to come along, because normally we're all longing for this worldly happiness. So in order to have that kind of compassion for somebody else, because all the happiness this person experiences is very short-lived, is not what this person is looking for. And when this happiness is over and either a neutral state comes along that easily can change into pain, or an actual pain comes along, then nothing is left, zero, nothing is left from this previous joy. It's just over. If you are meeting somebody today and this person is insulting you and unjustified and in front of everybody and is saying all kind of nasty things to you in front of your teacher or in front of your boss or something like this, you will be upset. This is normal in samsara. You will burn, you will be inflamed, you will think about, you will maybe shake inside and so forth. In this moment, that's a suffering of suffering. It's very clear. In this moment, what does it help you? That in the morning you had a nice taste of an orange juice. It's just over. This experience, this joy that you had there in the morning, is just over. It's just gone. It's a pitiful state to only experience joy that is completely over the next moment, or definitely half an hour later. So a spiritual person who has understood this level of suffering or of dissatisfaction, this aspect of samsara, can then generate compassion for those who only have this kind of happiness as an experience. Because the person is completely in touch with his own deeper wish of a longing fulfillment, of actual experience of peace, which means no suffering, and an actual experience of bliss, of fulfillment that lasts. As I was saying last time, I quoted this philosopher Nietzsche, who said, all joy wants eternity, wants deep, deep eternity. So a person who is in touch with that and is practicing because of this and wants to get liberated from samsara in order to attain an eternal joy, as he's longing for, and is no longer interested in these kind of short-lived, always changing happy experiences that are coming from pain, changing into pain, and don't leave anything in your daily experience because they're just over and gone. That person aiming for an actual fulfillment, or having attained an actual fulfillment, an arhat, for example, will be able to generate a compassion for everybody else who's just running after these kicks, after this short-term happiness. And so that's a completely different type of compassion. Yeah. It's not about people actually being in pain. It's people of being in a situation that will frustrate them for sure. And then even further than that, because Geshe says some other religions might also have this understanding. Yeah? So other religions that are aiming for a spiritual way of life, I don't know, maybe the Jains or certain types of Hinduism, or maybe, I don't know, maybe some ascetics in Christianity or in Mount Athos or something like this. Yeah? So I don't know what different practices are done or what kind of motivations exist in other religions, but other religions might also have practitioners that understand that there is a much higher level of existence which is fulfilling according to their teachings, and what is going on in this world is just short-lived and is not leading anywhere, and has always been there. In the middle of war, people have experienced some kind of suffering of change, some kind of happiness, and then the war went on. Yeah? They went out, and also in the war, there is sometimes sunshine. You go outside, there's the warmth of the sun, you enjoy that, and then the airplanes come in and bombard. It's just completely useless. It's just over. It's just so over. You're just so running. No point in having had this sunshine before. So that kind of practitioner would have compassion for the other person of only having this kind of experiences and running after this kind of experiences, running after some kind of joy as if it would be in the nature of joy, as if it would be the answer to the deepest longing. And because of running after that, not having any time or space to explore other avenues, go down a different path. So there's compassion out of that. That's a spiritual compassion, not just that somebody broke his arm. And then in Buddhism, you go one further. You go to the suffering that is pervasive suffering. You have compassion for somebody because he's in samsara, because he has a wound. He has a spiritual wound. As long as there's a spiritual wound, at any moment, the suffering of change can happen. So the wound is this kind of state of being born in samsara such that you will also naturally have to be sick and age and die. If you have a body like this, you will have to die. Not even the Buddhas can stop that. Nobody can stop that. And if you do not understand who you really are, you will suffer from aging and you will suffer from death. And because you don't know who you really are, also your experience of sickness is very painful, much more painful than it needs to be. And in the end, maybe it doesn't have to be painful whatsoever. It's just a state of body. You might die from it. So what? You know that you're eternal. So you're very. It's because you're clinging to a certain situation. This ignorance that is behind all this makes all these situations painful or short-lived in the joy and so forth. Yeah. So that's a general setup in samsara. So on the one hand, you have this taking on this kind of body, which cannot other than decay and in the end die, disintegrate. So you're going to die. Cannot be otherwise. Before that, your hearing will fail, your seeing will fail, your digestion will fail. You will be in horrible situations, and you are lucky if you get so far. You are lucky if you get so old that at one point you can no longer hold your dirty substances, because that meant you lived 80 years. And that's where you want to get, really, because the precious human rebirth, you want to stay as long as possible a human being where you can do philosophy, you can do spirituality, you can explore your mind, you can try to understand what is the bigger mechanism of life and death and rebirth and so forth. Yeah? So you want to stay as long as possible. You want to get very old. But if you get very old, this will happen. It's natural. It's inbound. The moment you identify with a fertilized egg, that's what's going to happen. That, or you're going to die in a car accident, or you're going to burn in a fire in a house, which you definitely don't want. So that's the situation. This is completely normal in samsara. It's so normal that most people simply accept that. They don't talk about death being a suffering and that this is a flaw of the world or something. It's just how things are. You just accept it. The Buddha did not accept it. He said something is inherently wrong here. Everybody is going through aging and sickness and death. But that's just talking about the body. So if you start to practice spirituality and you learn about certain ethical behavior and you learn about love and compassion and so forth, and then you try to practice that, yeah, maybe you try to meditate on that, or you try to practice that in daily life and so forth. And if you do this, as I always said, the absolute foundation, the fundament of spirituality is that you're honest to yourself. You need to admit to yourself what's actually going on. You need to want to look at what's going on in your mind. You need to be able to identify what's going on in your mind. Maybe even giving it a term, like this is jealousy, or this is love, or this is generosity, this is anger, and so forth. Yeah? And then be honest to yourself, yes, this is actually a negative state of mind. And also, this is actually a suffering state of mind. I am suffering. If we don't get that far, that we are accepting that there is all kind of, let's say, spiritual problems in our mind, if we don't accept that what we're actually looking for is a happiness and peace, and instead we have a lot of kind of disturbance and a lot of stirred up situations, anger and so forth, then our practice will be on the surface. We will do something maybe for cultural reasons, or we will do something, let's say Tibetan Buddhism, because it's exotic, or I know because somehow we have a strong liking for Tibetan culture, so we want to do something like that. But it's not going to be spirituality. It's going to serve some purpose. Yeah, it's going to be another form of trying to have a suffering of change. So spirituality has a lot to do with like actually looking inside and actually finding what is going on inside, yeah, and then wanting to change that. Yeah. So as I always say, as me personally, so this is a little bit my personal trip, if you like. It's I always emphasize that we need to get in contact with this level that we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. We don't want any kind of unpleasant experience, and we want to experience a happiness that lasts. So that's the absolute basis. If we don't want that, then there's no need to go for nirvana, because nirvana is going to offer exactly that. A complete pacification of any kind of problem and a fulfillment that lasts forever. And it lasts forever exactly because of the pacification of the disturbing aspects of life. Yeah? Because the disturbing aspects of life are this suffering, the pervasive suffering at the 5 aggregates. So this is especially talking about that we have the afflictions, we have jealousy, we have miserliness, we have overconceptualization, we have worries, we have fears, we have jealousy, we have pride, or all kind of different forms of anger. We have maybe some people suffer from nightmares and stuff like this. With loneliness, maybe we want to exploit others, maybe we feel exploited and so forth. Yeah? So all kind of stuff is going on. So that's actually these kind of afflictions, as this is called, is actually what is disturbing our happiness. We cannot be lasting happy if we constantly have this kind of minds popping up. So by pacifying all of that, you will have a state of happiness. This goes so far that this pacification is much more emphasis in Buddhism, what I see, than the happiness part actually. Yeah, so Buddhism, like as we saw in the Four Noble Truths, you talk about the two sufferings, then you get an interest in where this is coming from. Then you discuss the two cessations. You see, it comes from the afflictions, from karma, and this is all coming from a misconception about ourselves and the universe. But then it says, and then there's a true cessation. A true cessation of the causes and the sufferings. The causes of suffering, true origins, and the true sufferings. Cessation. Yeah, so that ends. So it's talking about that ending. It is not that the fourth noble truth is not the third noble truth is not the noble truth of joy. Funny enough. Yeah, if the fourth noble truth is the actual nirvana, what is attainable, I would say it should be the noble truth of joy. That's not the case. Instead, the Buddha was talking about the cessation. This ends. All this suffering, all this crazy situation, all this crazy body, taking this kind of bodies and having the consequences from that, all this craziness in our mind, all this kind of afflictions, all this kind of habits that we have that we think we have to use. We cannot do otherwise. This is the only possible way to deal with the situation. Yeah? So we feel almost like fixed in that, even if it's painful and it's not successful and it's always difficult to do this. The habit is so strong that we follow it anyway. Also, we don't have an alternative maybe at hand and stuff like this. So completely stuck in this kind of habits that are producing more suffering and that only go for these kicks, this short-term happiness. All of that will be taken away, will cease, will end. Yeah, that's part of the true suffering. The true suffering is in the end are talking about what we call the 5 aggregates. So in a nutshell, this is talking about our physical aggregate, our body, and then also our feelings, our experiences, and then all kind of other mental aspects. Like our perceptions, our projections, our afflictions within all of that and so forth. Yeah, so the point is that samsara is not just a physical thing. Yeah, I was talking a little bit like about the unpleasant aspects of our body. And sometimes people think like samsara is all the war that is going on, or the injustice, or the suppression by the system, or something. This it seems to be all out there, and you want to get out of this into kind of paradise. The Buddha is very clear. The actual contamination, the actual samsara, is in your mind. Yeah, that there is no lasting happiness in your experience, in your mind. It's because of the afflictions being present in your mind. The afflictions then create karma, and then they activate the karma. If there is no afflictions, there's no karma of that type accumulated. And then there's also no activation of any kind of karma. The karma is just lying around. It's like an atom bomb. It's just lying there. Yeah, so we have enjoyed now so many decades of peace in Europe because of the atom bomb. Because of the atom bomb that never, I mean, not in Europe, was ever used. It's just lying there. So that's karma is like that. Karma is just lying there. It needs to be activated. And it's activated by the afflictions. So that afflictions are going on in your mind. They're not over there or somebody else's afflictions. It's not, when we talk about the affliction, that anger is activating karma, or attachment is activating karma, is not the anger or the hate that is in the world, or the attachment of the people, or the consumerism of the people. It's not like that. It's our consumerism. It is our hate, it's our anger, our pride, and so forth. Yeah. So that's actually what mainly this samsara is about, that we have this mental setup. And so therefore the Buddha is very much kind of into kind of talking about that there is a possibility of pacifying all these afflictions and a cessation of this continuity of the afflictions and a breaking of all these samsaric patterns and so forth. Yeah, so that's why the third truth is the cessation. And within that, it is sometimes kind of, I don't know, like that this like it needs to be understood that if these factors are ceasing in our mind, then the mind will almost like naturally give way to joy, a lasting joy. And that joy will not be interrupted by any of the afflictions because they have truly ceased. There's no interrupting factors anymore. Yeah. So for example, let's say you are at this famous lake that I'm talking about so often. Yeah, so you're sitting at the lake and everything is peaceful and everything seems to be very, very pure and so forth. And you're sitting there and you enjoy this and you're really within yourself and you're peaceful and calm and stable. And then that famous guy shows up with a ghetto blaster and sits right next to you and very loud and very coarse and just not your style and so forth. And the whole piece is gone and you're getting disturbed because of that. So actually not because of that, but because of your reaction to that. Yeah? It is what is happening in your mind that ends your peace, right? So in the true cessation, any of these kind of patterns in the mind are gone. Whatever peace you experience will stay. Because there's no factors anymore that could go for an interpretation of the situation that everything is horrible and you need to defend yourself and it's too loud and so. None of this. Yeah, so that's the point of the cessations. There is an end to the factors that stop your peace or that stop your happiness. Yeah? So that's what we need to understand in this true cessation, that actually is talking to the answer of our deepest longing for a lasting fulfillment. The true cessation makes that possible because there's a complete absence of disturbing factors. Therefore, there can be a lasting peace, fulfillment, joy, bliss. And the Buddha was teaching the Four Noble Truths in, I think, 3 times in a row. He was addressing his very first 5 disciples, very outstanding yogis by themselves. They had already kind of done incredible practices together with the Buddha beforehand. Then at one point, the Buddha stopped this kind of practice that they were doing together because he came to the understanding that this is not leading to liberation or to nirvana, to enlightenment. And on that basis, he got up and he ate a little bit something. They were into asceticism, so these other 5 were thinking he gave up on the practice and left him. Yeah. So, but still, what I'm saying is these were people who were themselves in a high level of yogic practice, asceticism, concentrations and stuff. They were definitely seekers for the answer to the deeper longing of happiness. So these 5, which according to Buddhist tradition actually had a strong karmic connection to the Buddha over many, many, many lifetimes. Yeah? So there's many stories about the Buddha in his previous lifetimes, and in many of those there is these 5 people, these 5 beings also present. So they already share some long history and karmic connection with the Buddha over many, many lifetimes. And so also in that specific lifetime they were there. So he's teaching to them. The very first teaching was the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, and the audience were these 5 very extraordinarily karmically connected people connected to the Buddha karmically over many lifetimes, people who did a high practice over many lifetimes and also in this life. And to these people, he just taught that this is the noble truth of suffering. This is the noble truth of the origins. This is the noble truth of cessation. This is the truth of the path. And on that basis, one of them already got high realizations, and all the others were kind of also very much kind of drawn. And then the Buddha said this again with regard to the Four Noble Truths. So what was it? The true sufferings are to be understood. The true origins are to be abandoned. The true cessations are to be attained, and the true paths are to be practiced. So he taught the same 4 again with an action. Yeah. And so the first one that he said was the true sufferings need to be understood. You need to become completely clear what samsara means for you in your case. You need to understand the true suffering. Comes a little bit like, probably I'm saying something in this direction when I say we need to be honest to ourselves. We need to look inside and find what's there. And whatever is there, we need to acknowledge. So the Buddha says the true sufferings need to be understood. The true origins need to be abandoned. That's what it's all about. Samsara needs to be abandoned. The causes of samsara need to be abandoned. You need to get free of that. And this is possible because there is a true cessation, and that true cessation needs to be attained. And that will be the answer to our deepest longing. And it will be attained by way of practicing the true path. Yeah. So he taught the Four Noble Truths with an activity connected to them. And then he did the same thing again, and he taught each of these truths by giving them 4 aspects. He was talking about 4 aspects of the true sufferings, or the true origins of the true cessation, of the true paths. And so I want to talk a little bit about this, or I want to bring in here a little bit these 4 aspects of true cessation. So the true cessation aspects are like this. The true cessations are a cessation. They are pacification, they're peace. They're sublime, they're sublimity. And they are a definite emergence. So out of these, let me think, the cessation, I think, is they're a state in which all the origins, I think that where the sufferings have ceased. They're a state where the origins have been pacified, and they're a state of sublimity. So here, actually, the Buddha is saying that it's bliss. And so that's my point. My point is, in the end, the true cessation, or nirvana, the state of an arhat, as we call this, is supposed to be the answer to our deepest longing for being free from suffering and to experience a lasting, ever-fulfilling happiness. But all what the Buddha is talking about is suffering's origins, the ceasing of that, and how to get there. But if you go to these four aspects, you have the cessation of the sufferings, the pacification of the origins, and then you have sublimity, bliss. So here it is. Here it is in the Four Noble Truths, the actual point of attaining a happiness which is in the nature of happiness. Okay? Yeah. So this came to mind somehow. Oh my God, we're almost through. I want to talk about something very different. Anyway, do you people have time? Do you have time? Some more 20 minutes or something? Yeah? Anyway.
If it's not a problem for you, then for us, I guess it's okay.
Okay, cool. Then we do some more 20 minutes or something. We see. I just wanted to say something about this true cessation. Sorry, the true origins. Yeah. So the true origins are all these afflictions which are creating karma, and by activating that karma, you take a rebirth. Once you take a rebirth, you're in samsara, and you have attained the all-pervasive compounded suffering. From now on, anything goes. Any kind of suffering or suffering of change is possible. Anything within samsara. Yeah, anything that is either an unpleasant feeling, an extra suffering, or anything that is a happy feeling that is in the nature of suffering. Anytime, because you took a birth. So actually, here in Nalanda, the monks, they're doing every 2 weeks to do a sort of ritual which is called sojong, takes like an hour or something. And this is something from the Vinaya, where it's a purification practice for 1 hour. So within that, the abbot or the geshe that is leading it will recite a sutra. And in one of these sutras, the Buddha says, monks, to die is easy, to break your ethical discipline is difficult. And what he wants to say with that, oh, it's problematic. What he want, and then he says, when you die, this life's aggregates, body and mind, are swept away. When you break your ethical discipline, for many hundreds of lifetimes, you will have difficult rebirths. So within that, what he's saying is, when you die, there is something like a, I mean, it's not really the case, but when you die, you get free of this thing that you took on at birth. Yeah, you get free of these 5 aggregates, body, feelings, mind, whatever, yeah, patterns. This life's samsaric bubble is gone. And then we make another one. Then we take a rebirth. Yeah, to die is easy. When you die, the aggregates of this life are swept away. And then we take another one. And we have no chance about taking another one because we are not knowing who we are. And in the time of death, there will be a strong attachment to get another one, and we will activate a karma, whatever it is, as long as it gives me another life. And as a result, you get another life. You get another aggregates that are coming from karma and afflictions and have all kind of patterns and all kind of ideas. What is happiness, what's not happiness, what you need, what you don't need, who you are, etc. And then you have to go through all of this, which will not go beyond the nature of suffering. It will have happy experiences, it will have suffering experience, like actual pain experiences, but all of this will be in the nature of suffering because it is not going beyond the it's not going beyond what is created by karma and afflictions. That's what is called contaminated. This is about our aggregates are called contaminated aggregates because they have as their cause afflictions like anger, hate, jealousy, pride, and so forth. Yeah, and out of this karma and this karma being activated, this is the source for why we have this body, why we have this kind of character. Yeah, we could talk about character, we talk about feelings and mind and patterns. We could talk about our character. So all this kind of massive samsara and all this massive suffering and so forth, which we will do away in the true cessations, all that is coming from the afflictions, and the afflictions creating karma and activating it. And the afflictions themselves have as their source the ignorance that is grasping for a self that is existing in and out of itself, that is maybe permanent, that is maybe a special factor within us, or that is kind of existing without depending on other causes, is unrelated to anything else, is independent, cut off, a core that never changes, and so forth. Yeah. So this kind of idea. So in other words, and so the Buddha says that this is all not true about ourselves. We are very much connected with everything all the time. We are not independent. We are very much dependent because we are connected. There is no such core to be found. There is nothing that is kind of fixed about us. Everything is in the flow, which means we don't have a specific character. So if you think about this, you don't have a specific character. How does this feel? Do you already feel lost? You already feel like, oh, I would very much like to have a specific character. I want to know who I am. Because when you die, you will no longer know who you are. But you might want to know who you are, even if this is dissolving, and you might grasp for something to be. And you take another life in order to be something. Anyway, my point is here that the source of samsara in Buddhism and also in some other Hindu systems is described as being an ignorance, yeah, not understanding how things really exist, and not only that, but this ignorance is not like ignorance actually means that ignorare means like to not know, and it is a not knowing in that it does not know how things actually exist, but it is not only doing that; it's worse than that. It's not just being stupid. It is projecting. It is projecting a reality that isn't even there. Yeah. So it's not just that we don't know that we are depending on many things and that we are changing all the time and that there is no core to ourselves while we actually nevertheless exist. But instead, ignorance is creating a feeling that in order to exist, you need to be something. You need to have a core. You need to be fixed. In order to be something, you need to be something specific. You need to have a fixed character, which you can never break out, because otherwise you don't exist. You don't have a core. So ignorance is not just not understanding what's going on, but instead it is projecting the opposite. Yeah. And so that's a very, very interesting topic. You know, the topic of the amazing capacity of the mind to create worlds. Yeah. The mind, in the end, you know, the mind is described as dying in one place, going through an incredible transformation to ground zero, the so-called clear light of death, then leaving that body, and then in the speed of thought, not light or something like that, in the speed of thought, where it wants to be, it can proceed to where there's the next rebirth. Yeah, so there's something talked about like an intermediate state and so forth until certain conditions come together and so forth. But anyway, in the end, this rebirth might be taken, let's say it's on this planet, and you have been in Romania and somebody in Romania dies, and then he goes through this process, he goes through the clear of death, and then leaves this body, and he takes rebirth in Australia. How do you get there? Do you walk? Or maybe with a plane, maybe the plane, it takes him hours and days and stuff like that to get there. He's going to be there the next second, if the conditions are right. Yeah, so this grasping for another life is immediate, has immediate outcomes. So let's say he's came to rebirth in Australia, but as a scorpion, right? So what happens here is that due to the karma that has been created by the mind, there is now the experience of a scorpion roam, let's say in the desert of Australia, with all the things and creatures that live there. It will be a very, very different experience from being a human being. While at the center, it's the same experience. It's going to be an experience of wanting to be happy and not to suffer. And it's going to be an experience of intensely identifying with who you are, not in philosophical terms that you spell this out and you have definitions of what is a body and what is a mind and stuff like that, psychology. But there is going to be, like, conceptuality is not something that has to do necessarily with language. Every animal has conceptions, has thoughts, can clearly discern between this and that. And in the same way, also an animal is identifying, does not want to die, is identifying with this body, runs for its life, is definitely identifying with being that and not being another type of life, and so forth. Yeah. So, so that kind of experience is the same from this very basic point of view. But with regard to the details, it's going to be a very different world. Well, let's say you're born as a fish, also in Australia, or off the shore of Australia, let's say. Yeah. So you're going to live a life where you're going to float through space. You're going to float through that what you're breathing. Very different from your experience right now. And that has been created by the mind. The mind can experience that. The mind can be in that kind of body, that kind of environment, and experience it as a whole life. And then within that, be afraid, looking for food, enjoying the food, being afraid for its life, all kind of stuff. So the mind has this incredible potential to create things. I mean, we can see it even in human life, where the mind has the capacity to create dreams. Yeah, so there's nothing about dreams. That none of the things that we have in dreams, it has any reality to it, apart from that we experience that. Completely created by the mind. Yeah. So far that in a nightmare you actually sweat and you move and maybe your heartbeat goes up and stuff like that, and you actually want to run but you can't and stuff like this. Full on experience as if you take a rebirth. So the mind has this incredible potential to create worlds and to create experiences. And actually the time frame might be different in a dream. Yeah? So you might actually experience a long-term experience, like many weeks or something like this, a whole movie, a whole story in your dream. So that's also interesting. What about time? Is it so fixed actually, or how subjective is time actually? So in the dream, the mind can create a whole world, including time, and so forth. So it is very, very creative, and it is ignorant. It doesn't know how it actually exists and how the things around it exist. And within that very ignorance, which is also mind. Yeah, ignorance is the mind. It's not something else. This very mind also is very, very creative and is creating a world of things that don't exist or don't exist like that. Yeah, for example, if you just use these technical terms for time being, ignorance would project on yourself that you are existing in and out of yourself. That you have a core, character, that maybe even that you don't change. That's not so clear. There's discussion about that. But that there is a core inside of you that is not dependent on anything else. And if somebody would analyze in the right way, you could find this core. So that kind of thing is projected on yourself and on everybody else and on everything. While this is not the case, everything is dependent arising. So this projection is going on, but the mind creates that appearance. Things are not just kind of thought about like that, but they appear to the mind as being existing in this way. And then the crazy thing happens. Ignorance believes its own creation. It projects on the world and then believes it to be like that. It is completely ignorant about what it's doing. It doesn't understand that it is projecting ever. And it's believing its own created appearances. So that's a very, very core thing to deal with. And it's easier to understand this if you go to the sons and daughters of ignorance, which is the afflictions. Because the afflictions are all also defined by projecting. Also the afflictions like attachment and pride and anger are creating objects that are not there. And so the Buddha makes statements about what the afflictions are doing, And what we need to do, we need to take that and check it out in our own life. You need to find out, is that really the case? We are very much invited by the Buddha to put everything into question. Yeah? The Buddha says, when you are angry, you are actually projecting on the world, and then you believe this projection. So that's quite a statement. So it needs to be checked out. Is that really true? Because if it's like this, that's scary, actually. So what the Buddha would say is that if you are angry with somebody, and let's say quite angry, yeah, strongly, let's say hateful, the perception of this other person will be far from that this person is a complex personality, that this person has good sides and bad sides, that this person has a family, has a mother, has people that love this person, and so forth. The person will appear as being only a problem, having no good side possibly, having only bad sides, and that of course means this person needs to be hit. He cannot possibly have a correct point in what he's saying. He needs to shut up. He's just so stupid, he has never said anything true. That's the projection that's going on. Such a phenomenon, such a person does not exist anywhere in the 3 times or the 4 directions of the universe. There's no person like that. Anger is producing a person, an object of its anger that doesn't exist whatsoever. It's a complete projection, and then it believes that. And then it acts on that. So that's the son of ignorance. Ignorance is using the creativity of the mind and produces a world of inherently existent things which don't exist whatsoever. There's no such thing like an inherently existent person, table, tree. There are trees and tables and persons, but there are no inherently existent persons, inherently existent trees. There's no such thing. So the ignorance creates such a world and then believes it. Anger creates objects of hate. It creates them. There are no objects of hate. It creates objects of hate and then it believes that. That's scary. Coming back to the all-pervasive suffering of samsara, of simply being in a state of having afflictions in your mind. That's what it means. You're in a state where the afflictions are creating worlds, subjective worlds around you that don't exist whatsoever. There's a person in front of you, all right. That person has many, many different sides. This person says this like now, says something else later on. This person was a child at one point. This person was a baby and was nursed by the mother, didn't know left from right. This person has a complex history. This person is aging and is going to die. And it gets much worse than that. This person was your mother in your last lives and your friend in your last lives. But let's leave this out of for the moment. This person in front of you, right here, right now, that woman, that man, whatever, has many, many sides, has many, many skills, has many, many faults. The point is not that this person has no faults. The point is that anger makes out of a certain thing that you don't like. Maybe somebody else actually is impressed by this quality, by this aspect, but you don't like that. And it makes out of that this person is virtually solely that. This person is only that aspect that is bad. It has no other aspect. This person is somebody that everybody will naturally be upset with. Nobody could possibly love this person. That's the appearance in this situation. You need to check this out. You need to check this out in your own mind. What are you experiencing at that time? It's difficult because in anger normally we are pretty engaged, to say the least, engaged, yeah. But that's what needs to happen. Yeah, we need to analyze what happened. How was this experience? What was the actual life in all of that? Life is experience. What did I feel? How did it appear? Like in what state was my body? Like was there kind of pain at the heart or something? So all of this, you become aware of all of this, and within this especially, how did the person appear? what kind of appearance was I actually dealing with? Yeah, because if you get that, if you can catch you, if you can analyze this, if you can investigate this, if you can understand that, then you can finally sit down and can analyze the appearance. Yeah? Let's say you find out that in this situation, this person, this hateful, screaming person, appeared as being only negative, appeared like disgusting, appeared like nobody could love this person, appeared as only that. No other aspects. Then you can argue with yourself, is that the case? Is this person not loved by anyone? Is this person having only this one aspect of screaming at people all the time and stuff like that? Is this person always abusive? Is this person only having negative things? Is that what I'm perceiving there even necessarily negative, or it's just disturbing myself? And so forth, yeah? So then you can start to shake the belief in the appearance. Yeah, so anger will make an appearance and then believe that. So you can shake the belief. And then later on, you might be able to also work with the appearance. Yeah, reduce the appearance, keep it more to the ground, keep it more both feet on the ground. So for example, this guy is screaming at you and is saying all kind of nonsense, which just is not true, but is very insulting and so forth. And you develop a spiritual mind where with the corner of your mind, you're checking. You listen, okay? But with the corner of your mind, you're checking, how's the appearance? What am I doing right now? How do I feel? One of the cool things is really to check your body. How am I sitting here right now? Yeah? And then you can already on a very coarse, direct level, you can decide while the person is screaming at you to take a different seated position. You open up completely. Yeah, instead of kind of saving yourself and defending yourself while screaming, yeah, you open up because you understand the screaming is going on over there. What I'm doing with that is going on here. I can leave this person over there screaming and I can be open. Completely new experience. And you can bring to mind that this person is not always screaming. You can actively bring to mind, normally this is not possible in the situation itself, but if you take this to your meditation cushion later on, or at least to your chair with a coffee next to you, and you reflect on the situation, then you can think about the whole situation. So that the thing with the creativity of the mind has actually different stages. Yeah, let's say you make an experience with somebody that is unpleasant. Yeah, you don't like how the person is talking or what the person just did. Can be that the person showed kind of a face that you felt like is inappropriate or something. Just a facial expression, no screaming or nothing. Or it could be that the person just passed you and didn't say good morning. Could be anything. And then the unruly mind says, yeah, I wonder why he just didn't say good morning. What was that? I mean, that's just something everybody says good morning, right? So why would he, what's special about him that he doesn't have to say good morning? And I mean, I say good morning to him and he can say good morning to me, right? And actually, if I remember right, yeah, actually now it dawns to me, he didn't say good morning yesterday as well. And quite often, I also saw he passed other people and didn't say good morning. I think in general, he's a mean guy. And also, one time he parked his car in the wrong place. And yeah, that's just more proof that he's such a mean guy. I wonder if he ever does anything positive for anyone, really. I think he's quite egoistic. I think he's just kind of really not giving any kind of concern about anyone else. Actually, I'm surprised with what a kind of negative person I'm living together with, and I have to work and put up with this person every day. And it continues on and on and on. This is how the mind creates a world. So that's the process. It's called, technically it's called inappropriate attention. Yeah? Something happens and you put your attention on it, you cling to it, you hold it, and then you start creating. Here. Storytelling. And so the good thing about this is when we understand this process and when we, with our scrutiny of what's going on in our mind and our honesty to ourselves, find out not only how is the person appearing when we're angry, but we find even before the moment when we start to make these stories. So during the story making, the anger is not fully blown. Yeah, it's not a completely huge balloon of anger. We have not created the whole thing. So it's in the making. So if you catch yourself in the making, you can stop it right there. Yeah, so this is one way of cutting anger. You get yourself while making the story. So for this, you have to also understand that any kind of thoughts, any kind of train of thoughts that are going on in the mind are completely ephemeral. They have no substance to themselves. They're just mind. They're just appearing. You do not have to think a thought to the end. You can stop it right there. When you identify a thought as being non-virtuous, when you identify that you are right now creating a bubble, when you identify that you are in inappropriate attention and you are creating objects that are not even there, you can just stop doing that. Because there's no substance to that. There's no essence to these thoughts. They can just stop right there. You can deliberately think about something else, which might lead to another interesting experience that at one point the mind says, but I would love to do that. I don't want to let go of this thought. I want to continue that because there's much more in that. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I know who I am if I kind of talk bad about others. I don't want to let go of my anger. My anger tells me who I am. If I criticize others, if I make stories about others, then I find out who I am. So I don't want to let go of this thing. The thing is this, samsara is complex. Yeah, to get rid out of, to attain nirvana by the Buddhist path is not going to be easy because we're talking about breaking a system, breaking spiritual, like psychological mechanisms that have been there since eons, since lifetimes beyond imagination. What we're doing here when we're talking with each other and when you're discussing this over about what's going on in the mind, this is something that has virtually never happened in our samsaric experience since eons and eons. To think about how this all works and to even kind of start to question if this is so successful, if this makes sense and so on, all of that is unheard of in our personal history. So that means all this complexity of samsara, how we build up certain afflictions leading to certain projections, and then this bringing about the full-blown affliction of anger in this case, which is an affliction that is of the type of suffering. It makes us burn. Yeah. So if we understand that, then we want to cut that, and then within that we find that there's even more that we maybe identify with our anger. Yeah, that we maybe feel like that we are strong because we can be angry. We ourselves can scream. So we know that we are strong and we know that we exist because we are strong, because we are screaming. And stuff like that. Yeah? So there can all kinds of patterns can be found one after the other. Yeah. In general, I think that anger is maybe rather easy to get rid of or to contain, not to get rid of, but to contain because it's painful. So if you go so far that you actually have enough love for yourself, that you accept that your life is about that you want to be happy and you don't want to suffer, especially that you don't want to suffer, and you understand how you're creating your own suffering and anger, you will find other ways to deal with the situation. You might be patient. You might want to stay open. You might want to check yourself. You can understand, oh, there's somebody screaming at me and makes accusations that are inaccurate. That's a difficult situation. Careful. Normally, I'm going to start with some strong anger reaction and I'm going to burn. I don't want to do this. This is a difficult situation. I will now practice patience before the anger comes. Patience is not the practice of swallowing down your anger and getting some tumor in your stomach. That's not the practice. Patience is that in a situation that is understood as being difficult, to stay calm. So in the very same situation where you normally would try to do some kind of explosive, aggressive thing like anger or screaming or whatever, like at least getting angry, yeah? In that very situation, to go for a very gentle path. And a gentle path, I mean, a path that is gentle with yourself. It is not a path that follows everything that the other person is doing, but you stay calm. And within this staying calm, with a normal voice, you tell the other person that this is inappropriate. But you stay calm. And you don't burn. You don't experience the suffering of suffering. Because you want to be happy and you don't want to suffer. Yeah. So patience is very empowering, actually, because it gives you the capacity to stay calm, to not be in pain. You're not going to have kind of emotional or uncalled for reactions. You're not going to do things that you later on regret. You're not going to kind of worsen the situation. You stay calm. You stay in complete possession of your wisdom, of your intelligence. Yeah, whatever kind of way of speaking conducively you have, you will be able to do that because you stay calm. If you don't stay calm, whatever normal conversation skills you have, you might lose in this very moment because of being angry. So you have so much benefits from simply staying calm. And the staying calm has to do with being identified. We have here a difficult situation. Careful, I don't want to suffer. I'm not going to burn myself, set myself on fire. I'm going to stay patient and I'm going to deal with this difficult situation with all the good qualities that I have. Because I'm not going to put myself on fire and lose all my good qualities, because this situation calls for good qualities and not for what appears to be a strong action, but is actually a stupid action. The strength is in the patience. The weakness is in the anger. Which is clear. I mean, if you would have somebody who's actually fighting with somebody else, yeah, like fist fighting, and then in the middle of this, you're fist fighting with somebody. In the middle of this, you take a knife out and you put it in your chest. It's not a strong action. So if you're having a difficult situation with somebody else and you set yourself on fire with anger, it is not a very powerful situation, not at all. It's completely kind of crippling you. So stay calm. Practice patience. Again, patience is before. Patience A is before you get angry. It is avoiding anger. Patience is keeping you active. It's not something where you kind of shut up unless you decide to shut up. You understand? There's nothing to be said here because this other guy is so out of his mind. Nothing to be said. We need to talk about this later. Right now, we just need to let him calm down, let him explode to the end and stuff. Yeah. So you stay patient. But even if you don't get active in an actual action, express yourself, still this is your decision. Yeah. So very active, very, very empowered, very strong. Yeah. So here with anger, this is very obvious. And with anger, you can very, very quickly develop a longing for breaking the cycle. And because you want to break the cycle, then you are more interested to find out about what's going on in your mind, and you catch your mind earlier. Yes, like for many people, it's like this. They get angry in certain situations, and then things flare up, and then there's all kind of words said and stuff like this, and you run away from each other, and then later on you remember this, and then you analyze this, and maybe you regret it, and you wish that you wouldn't have said that. Next time, you catch yourself while it's going on, not later on. And you can't do anything anyways. You just have to witness how it's unfolding, and you hear yourself say things which are completely embarrassing and stuff like this. Next time, you get yourself even earlier, and a certain word you don't say. You say other things, but you don't go that far. At one point, you stop it, and maybe you just walk away. The next time, you get yourself when it's starting, and the time before that, you get yourself while you're making the story. And then you get yourself in the middle of the story and in the beginning of the story. And at one point, you get yourself at the moment where you feel unhappy about what is going on right now. And you say, this is a difficult situation. I want to stay patient. This can go very far, I guess. So that's pretty doable because we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. The problem is with attachment. Attachment is an affliction. It does exactly the same thing. It is also creating worlds. worlds that do not exist whatsoever, not in the slightest. In the same way that this person of anger only having negative sides does not exist in the slightest. There's no person like this ever, has ever been, will ever be, or is here present in this present moment. There is nobody who has only negative sides, but this is exactly what we're relating to. We're relating to a person only having negative sides, complete fantasy, hallucination, fever dream. Because we are in fever of an affliction, of hatred, of anger. Same thing is true for attachment. Yeah? So the problem here is, I always say, like with anger, it's like somebody standing in front of you and is very aggressive. Yeah, so you don't want that, so you can step away from it. But attachment is sneaking up from behind, and it comes with a pleasant feeling. It's not the suffering of suffering necessarily, let's say. It's the suffering of change. So that's much more difficult to deal with. Yeah? To actually make that step and saying, like, I'm not going to make a big deal out of this object or out of this person. I'm going to stay in reality. There is nobody that has only good qualities, maybe apart from the Buddha and stuff like this, but this is normally not a person that we kind of have attachment for. There's nobody in our office or in our school or in the supermarket that has only good qualities. And so again, the thing is to find out how this person actually appears like that. This person actually appears to radiate. Check it out. It's really amazing. The person appears to radiate something. It's really kind of, the person really seems to be full of light. It's not the case. Complete projection. But it's a happy feeling to deal with this object. It's very nice to have finally met somebody who has only good qualities, right? Who will never hurt me, has no needs from his side, only going to serve me, and stuff like this. Will only be nice, always, will always be beautiful, and so forth. Yeah, it's not like that. It's nobody like that. It's nobody like that. And especially there's nobody like this who wants to serve us all the time, so we can fulfill all our needs for having a pleasant person around us, a person that is kind of entertaining, is funny, is patient when we want this person to be patient, and so forth. Yeah? So that's not going to happen. Like, for example, if you would find yourself a spiritual master, he will not do that. Quite the opposite, actually. So it's not that what we are normally looking for when we are looking for a relationship, or when we're looking for I don't know, a team in work or something like this. We are not looking for a spiritual relationship, obviously. We're looking for a very samsaric relationship where the other person is there to fulfill my wishes. Yeah, the other person is there in order to talk nicely to me. The other person is there to help me in my work, and I don't know what, all kind of expectations. And that's what the person is for. And the person appears like being able to do that, but that's not the case. Especially with samsaric beings. Samsaric beings have all their limits. They have all their own needs. They need something from you as well. Attachment is not about that. Attachment is not about what I can give to the other person. But the other person needs something from me. The other person appears to my affliction as if it is only there to fulfill my wishes. That's not the case. So a relationship that is built on attachment is having great chances to actually break down. A relationship that wants to last needs to be a relationship where you are willing to accept that the other person has mistakes, that you have to bring something to the relationship and not just gain from the relationship. You need to have to bring a certain level of love and compassion to this relationship, for acceptance, tolerance, and so forth. So attachment is not doing that. Yeah, the difference between love and attachment couldn't be greater. Yeah, some people think like, oh, when I love this person, then okay, I'm maybe attached to this person, but I also have love for this person. This is not possible. An attachment is solely there to get an object for your wishes. Yeah? Attachment is only relating to a person. But actually, no, actually, in a certain other context, I'm always talking about we are treating other people as if they are objects, as if they are cars or food or what have you, houses. We decide between this one is attractive to me, this one is unattractive for me, and this one doesn't mean anything for me. This is called a friend, an enemy, and a stranger. None of this is a loving attitude. All of this is a selfish attitude of everything in this world. The whole universe is there to serve me in my many, many needs. But the fact, and in that, the other person does appear like that. This is a person that is not fulfilling my needs and instead is kind of giving me unpleasant experience. I don't want this person. This person here is nice. I want to be with this person, fulfills my needs. And these people here, and this is the majority of the planet, they don't do anything for me. I don't care about them. They're strangers. So this is the afflictions. Afflictions do that, have this kind of attitude. And in this way, it's not different from this car. I think it's expensive and it's ugly. And this color I don't like in the first place. Get me rid of this car. This car, I know it's just some car, it doesn't do anything for me. This car here, this car is amazing and it's completely new and it's a real occasion and it's only half the price. And this is, I'm so lucky. Treating people like that. That's what afflictions do. And relationships won't work out like that. And they don't work out like that on a daily basis. That's what His Holiness says. His Holiness says, due to a certain kind of attraction, many relationships start to a certain kind of attraction. But if you want them to last, at one point this needs to change into love and compassion, an actual concern for the other side. So again, attachment is not doing that. Attachment is not dealing with the other side in as far as this person itself has good qualities which are simply good on that person. Yeah, like rejoicing. Yeah? Like being happy for this person to be so, contained or spiritual or, generous. That's not what attachment is doing. Attachment is not interesting in that this person is very nice in this situation of being generous. The attachment is interested, what can this generosity do for me? What can I get from this generosity? Yeah? Or compassion would then be kind of to be very much being able to accept that the other person has mistakes and hold that. Yeah, the other person is easily angry. Yeah, it's like that. And you hold that with compassion. And so forth, yeah? So of course, on a higher plane, yeah, the higher spiritual practitioners, they are only interacting with people like that. Yeah, they're only meeting them with compassion. Now, for example, for a higher practitioner, it would be not a problem to be patient with somebody who's angry, because he would not even be patient, he would be compassionate. He would not just experience this as being a difficult situation. I have to be careful that I don't set myself on fire with anger, therefore I'm going to be patient. This person is way beyond setting himself on fire. This person is not experiencing this as a difficult situation for him or herself. It is experiences as a difficult situation for the person who's angry over there and reacts with compassion. Attachment cannot do that. Attachment is not interested in helping the other person. Attachment is not interested in praising the other person. Attachment is interested in getting hold somehow of this amazing object that seems to radiate light. Be it a car or a person. So that's what the afflictions are doing. So what I'm saying is one can easily see with the afflictions how this whole projection thing, this whole creating of universes that don't exist whatsoever, like people that have no flaws, people who have only faults, things that are amazing and satisfying and going to make us happy forever and so on, while they're impermanent. So this whole situation, this whole universe that doesn't exist whatsoever is the universe of the afflictions. And if you can step out of that And don't make stories about things all the time and project all the time and create parallel universes. You know, reality doesn't care about your parallel universes. Reality will just unfold as reality unfolds and not in accordance with your fever dreams. And this is where the frustration is. Why is this person not constantly fulfilling my needs when it's only there for that, as my appearance tells me? The reality is that the other person has needs, and if you don't meet these needs, then at one point the person will walk away, isn't it? So the reality doesn't care about your projections, but the afflictions are constantly producing projections, parallel universes, and so on. And from there, the suffering comes. If you can cut that and live in reality and deal with the actual situation, you will be much better off. A lot of suffering and frustration and pain will be gone because you are no longer living a lie. You're living in reality. You're living whatever level of truth you have access to. Does that make sense? So I'm saying that in order to get that we can get a feel that there might be a very deep down level of projection on the world, which is actually the cause of all our suffering. Yeah. So my point is that projection creates suffering. Projection and believing projection creates suffering. The cause of samsara, the actual true origin, is an ignorance which is not just not knowing, but is projecting at a parallel universe that has nothing to do with reality. And the Buddha says because of that projecting and believing that, therefore you have all the other afflictions, all the other parallel universes on top of that, and then the creation of karma, and then the fear at death, and then the activation of karma, and endless samsara. So in the same way, how our relationship will greatly improve if we come into the reality of the other person with faults and good sides and act on this with love and compassion rather than with attachment that creates a person that has no flaws and is only there to serve me. In the same way, the relationship improves, our happiness or our satisfaction from this improves. If we are able to cut the basic projection on the whole universe and how things exist even, all the suffering will be gone. And so the true path will do exactly that. The true path will be a cultivation of a wisdom that understands reality. And it understands reality especially in connection with that ignorance. It understands that it is not like that. Yeah? But that's why we talk about the ultimate reality being emptiness. And emptiness is an absence. It's an absence of that what ignorance is projecting, what ignorance is hallucinating, fantasizing. That's not there. That parallel universe and this projection of that and the belief in that's being actually true and real, that's completely not there. There's a complete absence of that. There's an emptiness of inherent existence. So that true path will cultivate this understanding. And because it's cultivating the exact opposite, the negation of what ignorance is grasping for. It says that ignorance says like things are existing in and out of themselves. They have an independent core. And wisdom, the true path, are cultivating that this is not the case. There's an absence of inherent existence. There's an absence of core existence, an absence of essence and so forth, while everything exists, but not like that. And this is a direct antidote. Yeah? The direct antidote of the true path destroys the root of samsara, the very basis of all the afflictions of the true origins. And because the causes, the true origins, are abandoned, the results of the true sufferings can no longer happen. There's a cessation, which is a cessation, a pacification, a sublimity, and a definite deliverance, a definite emergence. So that's the idea. That's what wisdom is about in Buddhism. Yeah? And then it is 8:15. So unless somebody has a pressing question, I'm going to leave you with that and wish you all the best. Any pressing questions? No. Good.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks for listening so long. You did an extra 45 minutes.
Thank you.
We should
It was great.
We should dedicate though, I think. Yeah, especially as you did this extra 45 minutes. I think you should become very aware of the effort that you did. Yeah. So let's just kind of center ourselves for a second. Take maybe a good sitting position. And then we can think that while we are under the power of these afflictions and we are in samsara, still we can do good deeds, and any kind of positive and virtuous deed is producing positive karma as a natural thing. So we have just kind of engaged into a discussion group where we were together helping each other to explore topics deeper, explore ourselves deeper, and then we have now listened to this talk for some time, for quite some time, and try to follow to our capacity and so forth. So all of this was a very extraordinary action. It has not happened so much anywhere else in Cluj or in Romania or in Europe. Very rare, definitely positive, exactly what the Buddha wants us to do, exactly why the Buddha taught, where the Buddha came. So we have done definitely quite a strong virtuous action, and we have therefore produced also quite strong positive karma. And positive karma cannot other than produce happiness, but we don't want to have just any kind of happiness, like the happiness and that's in the nature of suffering. We want to dedicate this positive karma to ripen into the happiness that is fulfilling, into nirvana, and even beyond that, into the state of Buddhahood. So by dedicating this merit to nirvana and into Buddhahood, it will not be exhausted until we reach this goal. And then in order to get to these higher goals on a daily basis, I want to take everything that I have heard tonight and it made sense to me and want to integrate this into my life. Change my life so I can be more open, more calm, more patient and peaceful, more loving and helpful in this very life already. And therefore, if I find any situation to help others, I will engage in that. And if anybody wants to have some insight in this kind of topics, I will share this with others if they ask for it, in order to help as many people as possible to take control of their own life and fight back their afflictions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. You have no idea how welcome you are.